right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the Addictively Speaking podcast. I'm your host, James, and today I have a guest named Louie Bischoff, and she is the founder of Sober Relationship Blueprint. And we're going to talk about sober relationships today. We're going to talk about sober dating and what that's all about and what it looks like for people who are in recovery. And Louie, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming on. Tell everybody about yourself.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, it's so wonderful to be here. Honored to be a guest. Honored to be able to share my experience, strength, and hope, as the saying goes, with other people. And being able to put that in that space of, like you were saying, about sober relationships and what that might look like. So, a little bit about my background. I've been in recovery for 12 years. I just celebrated last week my 12-year anniversary
Congratulations.
for being in recovery on 7/11.
Yes.
2012 is when I walked in the door, and I'm in the United States. In the United States, I know it's global, but we have a convenience store here called 7-Eleven. So it's very
Yeah.
easy for me to remember my recovery birthday because so many times I would walk into the convenience stores and be buying alcohol. And my home group, they give me a little scratch off lottery ticket, and they give me a little coupon for a free Slurpee for a free icy tea. So,
Slurpee.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
we
great.
celebrate
Awesome. Well,
7/11.
congratulations, though. That's amazing. 12 years. I'm the same. I'm 2012 as well. I'm January 2012, though. So
Oh, yeah.
good
Awesome.
year for sobriety, right? Yeah,
No kidding. And then January and the July. So we're the J babies.
that's right. Um, so once you got sober and what really got you thinking about sober relationships
Yeah,
and
I love that
how,
question
yeah,
because
how did that come
yeah,
about? Because I mean,
it-
you don't really think about sober relationships when you're getting sober because you got a lot of other stuff to focus on. And I know that like in AA, they don't really suggest that you get into new relationships because it causes some trouble. When did you think about that? When did you start thinking about that?
yeah, great question about sober relationships. So just to kind of fill in a little bit of the missing spaces on what was, just introducing myself. So I did get sober in 2012. I started drinking alcoholically in 2009, and my marriage
Hmm.
ended in September of 2010. Now, the reason why I want to say those dates is that in 2009, that's I could see the aspect about my marriage getting worse and worse and the inevitable coming down the road. I didn't have those adaptive tools that I have today. So I picked up alcohol to ease the pain, to help through the stress, to help through the anxiety, the fear. At the time, we had young children, and just trying to be in a space of knowing that everything was going to change. So I was drinking alcoholically 2009, and in September of 2010 is when I asked for a divorce from my husband. It was just the end of the marriage. Just wasn't we weren't aligning with where we wanted to be together. It wasn't because of my addiction or alcoholism. It was because just like that's just where we were at the time. The reason why I say that, and I mentioned this specific month, is because in September of 2010 is when I asked for the divorce. And in November of 2010 is when I got into a new relationship because I didn't know how to have healthy, sober relationships. I got into a relationship that I thought was just should only last for a few hours, if you know what I mean, and it ended
Hmm.
up actually lasting for 4 years. And when I say 4 years, and talking about the relationship I was in, is that person and I, what we had in common was we were both active addicts, right? We were both actively drinking, active alcoholics, and being active in our addiction for 2 years. So you can just imagine two active addicts being in a relationship for 2 years and coming out of my 20-year marriage, also with young kids, how healthy not it was.
Yeah.
So it was in
Yeah.
2012 that I was like, okay, I can't live this way anymore. And he and I both went into recovery, and then our relationship still lasted for 2 more years. So I was saying is that we got drunk together for 2 years, and then we got sober together for 2 years. And just to say one more thing, when that relationship ended, I was kind of taking a little bit of a meander, looking at my behavior traits. I'm like, gosh, there's still a whole lot of not very healthy behavior traits, even though I've got 2 years of sobriety. And that's when I started figuring out how to have better relationships, because I started dating and putting myself into my own scientific experiment. Hey, let's see if I can have a boundary. Hey, let's see if I can say no. Hey, let me do this, let me do that. And then over time, I built the sober relationship blueprint, which is the template that I went through and then I created to work with people and clients in recovery to help them to learn how to have sober relationships.
Oh, that's super cool. So you basically were the guinea pig for your own blueprint. You used yourself and your experiences.
A
Awesome.
100%.
Um,
A hundred
was it
percent. And what?
difficult going going through those experiences?
Well, I suppose the right answer is yes. It was difficult because it was still growing. I was early
Hmm.
recovery, and I heard the phrase, "There's no comfort in the growth zone, and there's no growth in the comfort zone." So it was a whole lot of discomfort learning how to have
Hmm.
boundaries, learning about other intimacies besides sexual intimacies, learning about myself and how to have conversations that had discernment with them, not just being like, "Hey, I know you for 5 minutes. Let's trauma bond." Being able to be on a date and starting to date someone and say, "Hey, I'm not going to have any physical or sexual relationships with you for 30 days." I mean, when I said 30 days in the beginning, I was telling myself, like, who says 30 days? Like, that's ridiculous. And then for me, you were asking if it was difficult. Please do not get the impression like that this was a linear path. I would be like, okay, no physical contact for 30 days. And then I would compromise my own boundaries all the time. I'm like, JK, just kidding. Never mind. 30 minutes is fine. And just being able to engage in activities that I was used to doing. But over time, I got to a place where I want to have a healthy, mature, sober relationship. And like you said, building that blueprint. I'll just say right now, and I can say it again later, the website soberrelationshipblueprint.com, all one word. And each letter of the word sober, James, is an area of learning. And
Hmm.
yes, I
Okay.
developed the whole template. So the S is for, the S is for self-esteem. The O is for openness. The B is for boundaries. The E is evolving into other intimacies besides just sexual intimacy. And then the R is for readiness. So it's not just like, hey, I'll be a coach and I'll help you. Like, it's a specific way to be able to move through different aspects of learning to be able to have healthier, more mature, sober relationships.
Wow. That's really great. I love a good acronym as well. Like they're really great. Acronyms are really good. I love that. So in developing this, right? Did you think it was going to be something that you were going to do like as a coach, as a sober, like to help people find other people, or did you just think it was like, I'm going to do this for me to develop who I am and my relationship skills, or did you think in the beginning like I'm going to use this experience and then share it with other people? Like how did it go from just you to other people?
To more than just me. Oh, I love that
Yeah,
question. Right. Kind of like, how did this, evolve, if that's my understanding of your question.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So a little bit about that is that, yeah, I started doing it on myself. And like I said, putting myself into that data point of one, putting myself into my own experiments. Let me try this. Let me try that. Let me verbalize this. Let me say these things. And not only just watching my own behavior, like, yes, 100%, but also observing the other person's behavior and how that response was, and kind of like, um, what mistakes did I lose? Did I miss, right? Or what mistakes did I make? Then over time, as I got into, sharing some of my experiences over time, people in the 12-step rooms started coming up to me and asking me for my dating advice for, hey, how can I do this? Hey, Louie, will you take a look at my dating profile? Hey, Louie, when should I tell people about my addiction? Hey, when should I tell people about this? Hey, Louie, what do you think about this? Oh, I got this text message. What should I do? And just being able to continue to stay in that space and recognizing over and over again, like, that I was really great at this, really, really good at being able to help people move through these relationships for themselves. So it's, I don't match make, and it's not a dating app, and it's not a dating service.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to be a dating coach for my clients, whether it's a one-on-one or in a group setting, so that they become better people, more healthy people for themselves as they move forward through their dating relationships or their relationships in general. Because I do work with people that are in committed relationships, not just dating people.
Mm. Interesting. Do you find it difficult working with people that are coming out of like addiction and finding and recovery and stuff? Like, because your experience is going to be totally different than their experience. Do you find things? Do you have to tailor it to them, or does like the self-esteem, the like, does the whole thing work for everybody? That's what I'm trying to say. Is it, can you just pop it on one person and say, there you go?
Well, it's a really good question, because a lot of times where people are beginning to work with me or they begin to talk to me, they're like, yeah, I know that that's how it is for women, but it's different for men. Or I know that's how it is for this, but it's different for me. And that's that aspect about thinking that, that terminal uniqueness that we may hear about in recovery. And in my experience, and I really, really appreciate that question, because it's really a relevant question. Like, is it a one size fits all? Or is it really like,
Yeah.
I'm not able to work because I'm not a heroin addict? So, no, I can't work with heroin addicts, kind of a thing. No, in my experience, it's a human condition. And so it doesn't matter if you are male. When I work with men, I hear the same thing that men say as the women say. When I work with women, I hear the same thing that the women say as the men say. When I work with heterosexual people or people who are LGBTQIA, I hear the same thing, because in my experience, it's a human condition, meaning, hey, I want to have better relationships and I'm not able to, or my partner's bothering me, or this happened on a date, or whatever, different kinds of things. And it's not specific to the addiction. So it's not specific just to like only gambling addiction or only sex addiction or only alcohol or drugs. That's been my experience. One of my longest clients is a male who's 30. I'm a white female who's not 30, and he's a former heroin addict and a couple of other aspects of 12-step recovery. So he's also an SAA and Sex Addicts Anonymous, along with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I work with him all the time, not because he still needs it, but because the relationship and the relationships he's got in different areas, not just dating, are really he really wants to have that responsible part of him to show up in those different relationships, whether at work or with his own family or in dating or in the committed relationships. So it applies, in my experience, to all people.
Okay. I was just thinking about this as you were talking, because addicts usually just, they live in chaos, and everything is just carnage most of the time. And now you're having to teach like these new skills. So the first one you said was self-esteem. That's huge, and I imagine it's quite difficult that people will feel like they weren't worth anything. Teach them that they mean something to somebody, or they mean something to themselves. That must be a difficult one to even start with. What's your experience been with helping people find their self-esteem?
Yeah, so helping people find their self-esteem, in my experience, it's really difficult. Because for me, you had mentioned earlier about like in AA, they recommend not dating for the first year, not making big decisions. Um, I support that because I see people changing all the time. It takes time to do that.
Hmm.
For me in my business and working with people as a dating coach or relationship coach, like I can't control people's recovery, right? I'm not their sponsor. I can't say like you
Hmm.
must have 1 year of sobriety to be able to work in my program. Um, but to your question on how do I do it, it's the reason I start with S on self esteem is because it is where it all starts. And how do I get more self
Yeah.
esteem? Is building relationships and trust with my clients, being able to have those intimate conversations they're in private. I mean, they still may be on Zoom like this, but they're private
Hmm.
conversations where, I can raise my hand and say, me too, me too. When I'm not a heroin addict, but the behavior that I used to do, all that I kept doing is I just kept escalating my behavior to chase that high, escalating that behavior to chase the high, right? I just kept doing that kind of thing, and that's what I recognized because I had low self esteem. I didn't feel I was worthy, so I'm looking for that external validation to help me to feel better internally. And those are the kinds of
Hmm.
conversations that I have to be able to kind of pull it out of people. I'm working with a woman right now who's 33 years old, and all she keeps saying is like, I want to be in a relationship. I want to be in a relationship. I just need a man. I need a man. I need a man. I'm like, time out, slow your roll. Like, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's not the solution. What do you mean, Louie? What do you mean that's not the solution? I'm like, that's still external. Let's start working on you. Let's look and see what that looks like. You know, let's share stories. This is what it looks like. I was in the same place before also. So for me, having that credibility of being able to say me too, yeah, same, feels really
Mm.
complimentary to people. And to me, in that my experience, to answer your question, is where they can start to understand like I was the same as you and I'm different. And these are the steps I took. And I don't mean to like steps, 12 steps, but it's like let's start with self-esteem and talk about
Yeah.
it and do baby steps along the way. I can't teach somebody in a minute or in 1 month, but it is a journey. And that's why S is the beginning for sober and is starts with the self esteem.
Yeah. I feel like that's hugely important for people like into recovery is that you don't really have a lot of it. You've been, you struggled for a long time, and you start to feel a lot better once you get into recovery, but still like self-esteem is key. Um, do you feel like I know this is about relationships and dating, but these things, just listening to it seems like it would help people in recovery build other intimate repair relationships with family members and friends that they pushed away, and all those type of things, because those are also relationships that they have damaged in some way, shape, or form. So this could be applicable to not just dating and finding a partner, but also repairing relationships with family and friends and things, I would assume.
Absolutely, 100%. Because it's not about being able, like you said, find a partner. It's not about being able to date. It is about being able to have a better relationship with myself so that I have better relationships with all people. And so being able to start to understand the self esteem, like you said, the O, I know that I'm saying these things, but it's intentional. The O for sober, for openness, is being open
Yeah.
to new experiences. And I don't mean just like not dating the usual guy you usually date, but it's new experiences with your family, new experiences about work, new experiences about just how you show, and not just being in that. That's how I always do it. Oh, that's how I am. Oh, this is right. Being able to say, hey, there's more openness right now. I was working with a male who's in his early 40s, and I was talking about, hey, you really perform a lot, just as you go through life. He's like, oh, no, I don't perform. That's just who I am. I said, well, I would guess, because I know for myself, I thought I knew who I was, but then I recognized like I had created a persona based on the feedback that I'd always gotten from people. And so when I started saying that to him, he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. I have created this performance persona because that's the feedback I've gotten from people, and getting into that codependence aspect and being able to see how that's moving through all different areas of my life, not just in that one narrow area of romantic relationships or dating. So when I start working with clients, as you just pointed out, their relationships and the conversations I have with people, their things at work start to change, or maybe they open up to a different direction for what they want to do, as opposed to just being, that's how I always am. Well, maybe there's some other ideas. And then you were just talking about being able to be involved with family, or like you said, work or other friends. And the next letter is
Mm-hmm.
about B, which is boundaries, and being able to learn, for me, how to communicate in a loving and kind manner my wants and my needs and my boundaries. So I don't know if any of your listeners ever have any trouble with their parents, but the hardest relationship I have is with my mother. And being able
Mm-hmm.
to, again, communicate in a kind and loving manner my wants and needs and my boundaries in that relationship with her, because I still want to have a relationship with her, but I can't have that hurtful, harmful, tedious relationship that we've always had. So I have to change. And that's been my experience. So I love that question because yes, absolutely. It goes across all different areas of people's lives.
Yeah. Um, do you think, I mean, I think boundaries are quite important. So we just jumped on the B. So I want to get into that. Do you find it's difficult for people in recovery to set boundaries? Because they don't really, I mean, we never in addiction, you don't set boundaries. You don't know what boundaries are. You don't even know how to do anything like that. So, with boundaries, is it difficult for them to start putting boundaries in place for certain things? In your experience?
Yeah. So the aspect about what you're asking right now is around boundaries. And right, hey, and when people are in active addiction, there's like boundaries are just like some kind of a letter, some kind of a word in the dictionary, and that's about the extent of it, like, because they don't exist. I just know for myself, James, is that I grew up in a domestic violence household. And right, so my dad was beating us up, and my dad was beating up my mom all the time. And there didn't exist boundaries or healthy boundaries or stability or
Yeah.
security. I never saw them, and I never saw them respected. And I therefore wouldn't know how to do it myself as I went into adulthood. So to your question around boundaries, I've recognized that it's not just some people know how to have them and other people don't know. It's that some people learned and other people weren't taught. So recognizing when people come out of the addiction and they have a little bit of sobriety and recovery, recognizing like, I want to have a better life, and I recognize that that means that has some boundaries. But in my experience for myself and my clients and the people that I work with, it's all new. It's all new. And so it's really uncomfortable. I use a silly example. If you cross your arms right now, you're going to cross your arms in the way you always cross your arms. Like right now, my left arm is over my right arm, but if I change it and I go my right arm over my left
Oh,
arm, I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel comfortable. And
I
because
don't
it's
even know how to do
different.
that. I'm trying to think about it right now. I'm like, how do I? Because I would go like this, but like, how do I? Now I'm all messed up.
Right, because it's different and it feels
Hmm.
uncomfortable. And like you just did, you have to think about it. If I just say, "Hey James, cross your
Hmm.
arms," you're like going to be like, "Yeah, no problem." I say, "Okay, cross
Yeah.
them the other way." And it's now like, "Oh, wait, I have to think about it."
Yeah. How do? Mm-hmm.
So it's like really small, simple thing, but that's really how boundaries are, because I need to think about it and I have to do something different than I ever have. You know, the phrase that I love and I always have and I always talk to people about, if you want something you've never had, you have to do things you've never done. And so having boundaries and starting to do that, it's really uncomfortable. Like, so I can't tell you how many phone calls I've gotten. Louie, I just made a boundary. I don't want to go out on a date with this person. And I told them that like they're not a fit for me. I feel horrible. I feel right. Cause it's different. You're having a boundary. You're communicating your wants and needs. And all you're saying to someone is you're not a fit. And that's all the codependency. And being able to say, I'm not responsible for someone else's feelings as I have boundaries and but that being said, I remember one person who started to get into boundaries and they're like, oh my God, everybody's pissed off at me because, excuse me, everyone's pissed off at me because like I made boundaries with everybody. In true addict form, I went from no boundaries to 100% boundaries.
It's all
I'm like,
to all
bro,
boundaries. Yeah, every
yeah,
boundary you could come
bro,
up with.
reel it in. Let's work on this a little bit.
Yeah,
So
one
yeah,
boundary at
it's
a
a
time.
hard thing.
Don't do them all at once. Yeah,
Right.
baby
And
steps, right?
especially about relationships and romantic relationships, because we have a lot more emotional involvement in people we've had relationships with romantically because of sexual connection or a feeling of a concept of emotional connection, chemistry, air quotes, chemistry. And so there's a whole lot of different
Mm,
neurological science things going on in my brain. And that's why there's a whole lot to unpack around sober relationships and sober relationship blueprint, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, when you are doing these sober relationships and you're working with people, um, they're the people in recovery, right? The people they're going to have relationships with, are they also in recovery? Or is there any type of requirement that the person has to, you're meeting somebody who's, on the same plane, like as, they're both in recovery? Or is it just you're dealing with people who are getting into relationships with people who are, maybe drinking or whatever? Does that ever add a layer of complication to it?
Yeah, so the people I work with, right, is I'm qualified to be in qualified to be in this space because I'm in recovery, right? I'm an addict. I know what that feels like. And you were asking earlier, like how did I even get started on this or come up with this idea for the sober relationship blueprint? Is because it was me. I'm dating people, and you were asking, the people that I help, are they always dating people who are in recovery also? Like I don't, because
Hmm.
I date people. But the reason why I want to say that is that um, uh, there was something I heard the other day as that reminder is that water finds its own level. So when my water level was lower, I found lower level people. And as
Mm.
my water level has raised, I'm finding higher level people. And the direction of that is whether or not they're in recovery or not in recovery, it doesn't matter because they're showing up because I'm a different person. The people that I'm interacting with are different people also. But I certainly, again, raising my hand over here, I have dated in recovery. I've been in relationships with active addicts, and active alcoholics. And I just kind of, as the phrase goes, I just took those red flags and I painted them green. And I'm like, it'll be different. Or like, that's all right. I could do something, I'll do, he can drink all he wants. And I've also dated people who were in recovery, and just because they were in recovery doesn't mean that they were great people. It just means that they just didn't drink alcohol. And
Yeah.
so when I work with clients, and I love that question because it's really a really important question. When I work with clients, I'm working with the individual, my client, whether it's one on one or in a group. because that's where my influence is, right? That's where my relationship is. And then being able, as they go through their life and they're interacting with different people, coaching them as a person in recovery to move through things in a more healthy, more mature manner as they encounter, whether it's a romantic date or someone at work, as you were saying, or someone in their family. I just had a phone call the other day with someone who went on a sober coffee date, and it was in the
Mm.
afternoon, and she called me afterwards. And this is also something I see some people kick into a lot. And she's 39 years old, and she went on a coffee date, and the male was 43 or 44, never been married, wants kids, wants to be in a relationship. This is all the information she got in the coffee date for 90 minutes. And
Mm.
and when she was talking to me, it's like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not quite sure, like, if I want kids or not. I said, like, you don't know him. Like, you talked to him for 90 minutes. That's it. Right. And what I was going to say is just a lot of people, the neurons kick in and they hit those dopamine
Mm.
triggers and oxytocin. And I'm getting that addictive hit, and I kick into fantasy
Mm.
because it feels good. And just working with her and talking to her and reeling it back in to talk to her about how did she behave on the date and how did she show up. Was she like just trying to mirror him? She's like, oh, what's your favorite color? He says green, and then she says, oh, my favorite color is green too. Right? Just that codependency, the chameleon behavior, being able to work with her to help her or him in different ways, right, have healthy,
Mm-hmm.
mature, sober relationships. So I love that question. It's a really important question.
Yeah, because I just would think like it's weird because I got sober and I met my wife and I never really thought about what a relationship would look like sober for me at all, and I just didn't know how it would work because my wife drank, I don't, and I just was like, how does that work? How, because I worry about like I would, you would think I would worry about my sobriety, but I felt like I was strong enough to be, I'm strong enough to be around it. I just didn't know if like your clients had the same things where they struggle to deal with people who are actively drinking around them and those type of social settings because what a date is out on an evening, they could be having, somebody could be having a glass of wine across from an alcoholic, which might cause a little bit of. Do you recommend that the person does divulge their addiction to them, and at what point would you suggest to
Yeah,
broach that
James.
subject?
Yeah, those are a couple of really different, really important things. I love what you're asking, and I love just even what you're sharing. Being able to say, hey, I got into this relationship with this woman who's now my wife, and I was sober, and I never even gave a thought about a sober relationship. What does it even look like, right? And being able
Yeah.
to kind of have those conversations a little preemptively, a little bit more in the beginning with somebody who can guide you through that. Not I don't know anything about your relationship, but I think in my experience it eliminates some of the challenges and the difficulties. I mean, other ones are still there, but being able to have those thought processes earlier. But being able, I also have been around people, and I'll get to your specific question in 1 second. I have been around people
Mm-hmm.
and I have worked with people who are like, hey, like I was saying, heroin addict. I'm a heroin addict. I'm not an alcoholic. So I still drink, and I'm going to keep drinking while I'm dating. I'm like, okay, totally fine. But that's going to be really difficult for me to work with you because it's still a mind altering substance. I'm not a judgment statement
Mm.
at all. It's just an aspect about being able to work with someone to help them to move through and have better relationships for themselves. I mean, why would anyone want to spend any money with me if they don't want to have healthier relationships for themselves, right? That's where you want
Mm.
to start with. But to your question on like, should people tell or not tell? If I go to that very beginning point of the profile on the dating app, I don't suggest actively in AA, but I do suggest along the lines of alcohol is part of the issue, is saying, yeah, I don't drink, right? I don't drink. It's
Okay.
okay if you do, or something like that. In those conversations early on, again, depending on where someone's life is and where their recovery is, how important it is in their life, in that early conversation is being able just to establish that information. Like, for example, when I work with people that are in the S programs, the sex programs, I don't say, hey,
Mm.
on first date, say, oh, by the way, I'm a sex addict, because that's going to come off pretty creepy and
Yeah.
not going to go over real well. But being able to communicate, I'm in a 12-step recovery program. And as I feel more comfortable with you and we learn how to build trust with each other, I would feel more comfortable sharing my story with you at that time.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a really good way to break down that information and tell that to somebody in a well thought out manner. I mean, I know like when I first got into my relationship, I was just like, I'm in recovery. I had a problem with alcohol, and it's just like, it just goes like flying out of your mouth. And sometimes that is quite off-putting to people because they don't really know how to react to that, and most people don't know how to deal with that, especially when somebody's being really open about it, because most people don't say anything about it. So it does take people kind of go, oh wait, okay, so you're okay now, and I'm like, yeah. So it is a interesting subject. I just found it like I thought it would be great to figure that out and how you can broach it. But you definitely put it better than I probably would have put it when I did it.
Yeah,
um, it is. I blurt stuff out. I have a problem. I just blurt things out and I say
right.
things. I'm very open with my recovery, so it's just I just talk about. I feel like everybody should know about it or like have that awareness, and maybe that's just me. Um,
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
no, no, no. Go ahead. I was
I
done.
was going to say that in my experience, it's a yes and. It's not binary. It's not anything. It's a yes and. It's yes, being able to communicate about my recovery. And what I've learned is that people need to earn the right to hear my story, and being able for
Mm,
me to have more discernment and those boundaries so that it's not a trauma bonding situation in the first 10 minutes.
mm,
Like, oh, I grew up in domestic violence. Oh, you did too. Yay. Oh, you're an addict. Oh, me too. Like, yay. Like, oh, you're a mess and I'm a mess. Yay. We have a lot in common. And being able to move past the trauma bonding and being able to have those more restricted conversations, and the E for sober is about evolving into other intimacies, and just being able to start
mm,
to learn how to build the emotional intimacy with someone. It's about being able to build the trust, build a relationship with people, which does take time. I can initially have an initial feeling of trust, but over time, as I'm able to share more of my story, that connection is able to get deeper and I'm able to build other intimacies like emotional intimacy or intellectual intimacy, spiritual intimacy, which a lot of people, it's really important when they're in recovery, is to have spiritual
yeah.
aspect. And then having also just physical intimacy, not sexual, just like holding hands or hugging or understanding the touch, and before having a sexual intimacy. So I just know for myself, I was so shut down, James, emotionally, and I know a lot of other people are too in my conversations, in my experience, so shut down emotionally that the only time I could feel was being able to be in that a sexual intimate situation, because at least I had a feeling and an emotion. But today, with
Mm-hmm.
doing the work I have and helping people, I have those other areas of intimacy: emotional, intellectual, spiritual, physical, and sexual intimacy. And now I'm more mature, more healthy person.
So it gives you a more well-rounded um, scope on intimacy. It's not just chasing, like you said, like the sexual one is that it's like that instant gratification. It's like instant high, isn't it? Because all the endorphins go, right? Don't they? Everything starts going off in the brain. Um, I think that I I think I struggle with small intimacies and hugging and touching, and I don't know why. Because I'm in 12 years sobriety, and I don't know why. I feel like it's tough to be. I lost a lot of that through the years, and I'm really working hard to try to get that kind of stuff back. Because it is like, once that detachment it becomes really awkward and weird. You know what I mean? To hug somebody, when you're detached like that. So I'm kind of going through some stuff like that right now where I have to be working on getting better at being, with the smaller intimacies. Um, because they're important. They're hugely important in relationships. You don't really realize that. I've been married almost 10 years. Next year will be 10 years. You lose that. It becomes a thing where life takes over, and it is hard to find those little moments, You get lost in it all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important statement. And in my experience, the word has to be intentional. The word has to be intentional, and where I show up intentionally and concentrate on it. Because none of these things that I've talked about come easily or come naturally. They're all learned. And I have to show up in that space and be able to be present in that and intentionally be able to do that, even though, again, going back to crossing your arms the other way, it feels awkward and uncomfortable. But I know that that's important for my wife. That will help her
Yeah,
trust me more. That will help her feel more secure. That will make me feel
yeah,
happy. We have a better relationship together when those things happen.
yeah. You're absolutely right. And you lose sight of that so much that those little things mean so much more of a bigger thing in the grand scheme of it all. A
Yeah,
hug, a
especially when you
cuddle,
have
a
kids.
holding of hand. Yeah, they mean so much because, like you said, it provides security, it provides comfort, it provides all those things, and you kind of lose. I don't know, when life is hitting you, you lose sight of a lot of that, and it becomes a bit difficult and muddy. Um, so let's talk about the R. What is the R in sobriety? What is it? Let's talk about it.
You're
I
so
want to know.
awesome. You're so awesome. Thank you. That wasn't my intention to go through each letter, but it just works out
No,
perfectly. Each
it
letter
does,
is
and it
really
absolute.
important.
Yeah, and it's great that you've broken the whole thing down, and it gives people like that little guideline they can listen through, and they can hear these little bits and pieces. I think it's great, and it's worked out perfect. So let's hit it with the R. Let's bring it home.
Woo! The R, yay! So the R is for readiness, and the R
Ready?
is so it's not
Okay.
like, oh my gosh, do I have to wait for all five letters before I can like go out there? No, no, not at all. But the R is for readiness and being able for yourself to be ready for new things that are going to happen to you, and understand it will be uncomfortable. Understand it'll be awkward, understanding that it's not just you, right? You're not the only one. And having the readiness to be able to, going back to the self esteem, I feel better about myself. I'm open to new experiences. I'm able to have boundaries. I'm able to communicate my wants and needs. I'm able to be kind to people as opposed to like, no, I'm not going to do that. I can say, I appreciate your input, but that's not anything that I'm going to feel comfortable doing. Yes, I know that's a whole lot more words, but the reaction on the other person is a much different reaction when I say something like that versus no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not.
Mm,
I don't feel comfortable doing what you're asking me to do. That's not something I can do right now. Versus no, I'm not going to do that. Right? Having those
yeah.
boundaries, learning how to speak differently, evolving into those other intimacies, and recognizing this, and then the R for readiness, being able to go out into your life on a day-to-day basis and be ready for what comes, and knowing that you've got me, you've got Louie B in your pocket, you've got the work that you've done, and you've got the ability to be able to start to move through these different kinds of aspects that happen in life. So whether you've been married for 10 years and something else happens with your wife or your work or her work or your families, you both come from different families. If your families or parents are getting sick or anything like that, or children, like as I'm able to move through and have the readiness, I'm able to problem solve and be in the solution in a much better place than I was before I started, if that makes sense.
Yeah, honestly, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and this topic. I think it's been really insightful, a very interesting topic to be discussing. Um, so before we close out the episode, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Anything else you'd like to say? Anything else you got going on, or anything coming up with your business you'd like to
Yeah,
share?
thank you so much. So, a couple different things. Soberrelationshipblueprint.com, one word. Again,
Hmm.
soberrelationshipblueprint.com, one word. So, I do have a free download of 5 quick tips for a healthy, sober love relationship. So, right there on the website, it pops up. It's a great start. I also am doing webinars each month. In 2000, and James, just bear with me as I say this. Right now, Sober
Uh-huh.
Relationship Blueprint has a female directed wording and pictures on the website. But the reason why I say that, and you
Mm,
asked me earlier, the information is not gender specific. In 2025, I will
mm.
build a new website that will have men's pictures and male pictures, and it will be the same information. But again, if you go somewhere and you don't see someone who looks like you're going to be like, oh, this is just for women. It's not for men. Anyone
Yeah,
who's listening, please believe me, look at the information. It's about any gender, it's about any type of direction. It's because it's all about human relationships and being able to be in that space and being able to learn new things. So I've got webinars, and I've got, as I said, the free download, and I also have a digital book that's on there too. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to communicate that and help more people, because that's really why I'm here, is that step 12
yeah,
of being of
absolutely.
service to other people.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's good. It gives people the opportunity to, if they are in recovery and they don't really know how they're going to have a relationship in the future, or they want to repair relationships, like these things are key. I mean, if you think about it, the acronym, I mean, it's teaching you things that you really need to know to, work through what you're going through. And it not just in relationships, but in recovery, having the self-esteem, being able to evolve, like the boundary setting. It's all part of it. And it can help you build back these relationships that you damaged. It can help you forge new relationships and future relationships and work relationships. So I think it's like you said, we're saying it's not gender specific. It's for everybody. It's for people to build better relationships,
Yeah.
and people in recovery. We don't have the best track records with relationships when we're in addiction. So coming out of it, this is something they can hop in and dig into and really start help them building positive relationships for their future, because you want to insulate yourself with good people, people that are good for you and pick you up when you're down and those kind of things. So I think this has been a great topic, a great conversation. Louie, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Before we end this, I usually ask my guests 3 things that they need in their recovery. And but I want to ask you, because this has been relationship geared, what are 3 things that people in recovery need in to be in their relationships, to build their relationships, to better their relationships?
Oh, wow. What a great question. What are 3 things that people that are in recovery, what do they need to be able to build better relationships? So, firstly, I would say a support system. I know it sounds cliche, but it's really true. It's the reason why I say a support
Yeah.
system is so that you've got that new thought process, new ideas coming in from other people to help you to have different ideas, and for those people to be there when you're building relationships, whether it's with your family, romantic relationships, work relationships. So those people are there as you make your mistakes and as you stumble. So number one, having support around you. Number two, being able
Love it.
to start to have that self-awareness, starting to have that aspect around, hey, it's not that guy's problem about, oh my God, that guy's a jerk. The problem's me. But I don't mean it's like just me. It's like I have to have the self-awareness. So that's number 2. What can I change for myself? And then number 3 is being able to, again, I'm just going to say it, is being able to be open to change, being open to what is going to
Yeah.
be different and uncomfortable, because that's where the growth comes. So being able to have those 3 things, I think, are really key things to be able to have as you move forward in relationships.
Love it. They're all great. I love them all. Wonderful. They're wonderful tips. Thank you so much, Louie, again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this.
Such a joy, and it's just such a wonderful experience to be able to be here. And I said, to be able to share the message with other people so that they know that there is hope in relationships. You don't have to struggle through this stuff yourself. So I'm here to help, and I'm excellent at what I do. So thank you so much, James.